to today's session. Today we will be on the doing a live discussion about building a recommendation system. So let's treat this as more of a conversation between stakeholders. Whatever that that happens here might not be 100% applicable for a system design interview. There's going to be different details that might be slightly different across the scenarios. So treat this as a learning experience for every single one of us. Yep. So Amar and Goku, do you guys want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who haven't been with us for the last couple of sessions, we've had just a few amazing working sessions covering the foundations of recommendation systems. And today we're going to try to put it all together in a kind of a real world system design scenario. It's going to be very similar to the one that we did a few months ago, where Chip was playing the company executive and I was playing the role of a machine learning expert, and we're kind of going back and forth. This is actually a much larger topic. And like Khan said, just keep in mind that we're trying to fit all this in 90 minutes. So in a real world scenario, there will be a lot more back and forth, a lot more skepticism. We even had to drop a few very interesting topics like bias. But we can definitely talk about all that in the after party for those of you that have time to stick around. But we'll try to get through the main meat of the session today in the 90 minutes. All right, and Amar, if you want to kick off the breakout rooms. So I think we're going to have the exact same people in the breakout rooms today, so you can build rapport with the small teams. Yeah, I think the first one that we're going to do right now is just an intro. So maybe just share your name and maybe what you're working on, either work or a quick project or something, but it'll just be a few minutes just so you get to meet everyone.
Okay, I think most people are coming back. How was everyone? Do you have any get to know more people within the group?
Yeah, it was awesome. I think we have a lot of experienced folks. Lots of people working in the field or working in a tangent field wanting to learn about RecSys. I think we have a good interest.
That's pretty cool. I think there's a lot more people working on recommendations than I thought, and even some folks building out some startups in the space too. So pretty eclectic crowd.
Goku, should we start? Do you have any slides?
Let's go
first.
No slides, but I'll set up kind of the scenario.
Okay.
I think most of you here are from our Discord channel. If you're not, let us know. We'll share the link on that. And then all of this, like Han mentioned, is going to be live streamed. We're going to try to record most of the things that we do on YouTube so people can watch offline or rewatch if you want. But the after party, we're not going to record. So any like specific contextual questions you can save for then, but also questions that we don't have time for now, we'll definitely hit on the after party. All right, so I'll start by kind of setting up the scene. I'm going to be playing the sort of company executive, and Han, Amar, and Eugene and Jacopo will be the machine learning experts, and you'll hear from them throughout the sessions as well. But the scenario that we have is we're running a company called Chipcart. It's the latest Amazon competitor, and we have hordes and hordes of customers, new customers coming in from all the other marketplaces because we have a lot of very high quality products. But more importantly, our reviews are vetted and super high quality. So we're trying to become synonymous with a quality marketplace. But the issue is we have a lot of new users, and we need to be able to support and actually cater to their needs. So I've hired some consultants to try to explore what we should be building. We have a few things now, but it's basic to say the least. So yeah, Han and Amar, what do you guys think? What are sort of the questions you want to start with? Happy to share the details as you need them.
Okay, sounds good. I'll share my screen just so we have a whiteboard to jot some notes while we go.
Sure.
Right. So, can you tell us what the like what the problem is here that we're trying to solve. Why are we in this session together? What's the system that you have in mind?
Yeah, maybe I'll add a little bit of color on what we're currently doing. So it's a marketplace where you can try to buy, clothes, a lot of home appliances, etc. Think of it just like exactly like an Amazon competitor. We actually do have a pretty large catalog of items as well. The issue is that we have a lot of new customers, and a lot of times they're coming in through the homepage. And what we currently have on the homepage in terms of recommendations is we just pulled all the products that were bought yesterday, and we picked the top 10 or 15, and then we just throw them on the front page. And unfortunately, a lot of these products don't cater to the majority of our users. So a lot of people are actually leaving the website immediately. So one of the few good things that we are doing is tracking our user behavior and what they're clicking on. And the bad part is they're actually leaving. So this is a very naive way of doing recommendations. And we've always heard about more sophisticated ways of doing it. But we definitely wanted to work with consultants who have done this before. But yeah, that's the goal. We want to be able to give our users what they're looking for. And to us, it seems like a very difficult task to do, because how do we even know what they're looking for?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I definitely see the point here, and there is a trend with companies like talking about how recommender systems are pushing the revenue. One thing you did mention was like the click rate, like people are joining and but not clicking enough on items. So is that like a metric that you care about, and are there any other metrics you want to improve?
Yeah, so internally, for a lot of dashboarding needs and analytics, we've been tracking the click-through rate, so CTR. And just with our board of executives, and just in terms of our finance departments, we're focusing on CTR right now. And I think we want to do that because we are a very early stage company, and we have investment, we have cash flow, so we're not necessarily concerned with revenue just yet. We believe that if we can prove out that this is a quality platform that can serve recommendations, revenue will follow. So right now we are hyper focused on click-through rate, and we'd definitely like to increase that.
When you say click-through rate, is it like on specific products? Like when you show an ad, do you want people to click on that? And also you mentioned like you're focusing on that. So would you also care if the click is resulting in a buy?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. So there's so many different avenues that our users can get to a specific products page. We have a separate team that's working on around the search. So the reason I want to talk to you guys is specifically around the either single or a few catalog item recommendations that we're serving. So either in the form of an ad or in the front page of a website or sort of a side panel. And yes, we are actually tracking specific user behavior, and we even have down to the session level. So we kind of know what the specific trajectory of clicks that a certain user may be going through, and we are able to actually give more. We're able to kind of log and say this is the click that actually led to the purchase, etc. So we have all these tracked for analytics needs, but we're not actually doing any insightful things with respect to recommendations on them.
No, that sounds awesome. I think like we can approach this with one way, which is basically to try to recommend items to users based on some knowledge that we've gathered throughout history. So in this case, one system we call batch prediction, which is basically we take a look at all of user history. We try to make a model, make a system that can recommend items that we think those users would like, and rank them in a way to improve the overall metric that we care about. So basically, this would, I'll go through a system design step by step on a high level just to show how this might work. So basically, we have online data that we're gathering. We have a feature store that whenever we get new samples, we log the features. And then we have an orchestrator that manages the overall workflow. So every time we get some, maybe based on a schedule, maybe based on some other rules that we have, we take those data, we train a model to retrieve and show the best items. We measure how good it is offline. We make predictions for the current users, and then we publish those predictions. So now we have a prediction somewhere. When a user logs in, we grab the best items that we think would increase their click-through rate and show them those items on the UI. Now, do you have any comments on such an approach? Do you have any questions about the items that I showed?
Yeah. Well, this already seems like a lot. So I'm sure we'll get into the specifics in a bit, but just at a high level, my first concern is, even though we are early stage, we have a lot of new users coming in. So I'm not exactly sure how the system you just described will be able to kind of cater to new users. We do have some data on what exactly they're coming from, if they're coming from certain Google searches. The other issue is we have, like I mentioned, we have a pretty large catalog of items too, and they're pretty dynamic. So even on a 12-hour basis, there may be pretty large shifts in our inventory for certain classes of items. So I'm not exactly sure how that logic would work. This sounds like a pretty good system, but I think I can say for sure that our system is a little too dynamic that for this kind of batch thing to work. But yeah, what do you guys think about that? Do you think this could still suffice? Because this sounds. It sounds to me like since you're leading with this may be a simpler solution, but it may not be good enough for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this system does suffer from that part where every day or every period you are trying to gather the items from the previous part. You're making the predictions for the next day, and when the user logs in, that's what they get. However, with what you mentioned there, what we know about the cold start problem, first time people come to the site, we're not dynamically doing anything with that. So there are solutions, of course, and perhaps we can discuss with the audience in a breakout room.
Would you mind zooming in actually a bit?
Sorry, Aditya?
Would you mind zooming in a bit actually?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds great. If we can kind of discuss with everyone else to see, so this batch system versus something else that's a little bit more dynamic, maybe. I can share more on the type of data that we have, but we do have click trajectory paths. We do have data on more session-based level as well. Again, used for analytics purposes, not necessarily for recommendations. So yeah, I'd love to compare like batch versus session, and definitely this cold start problem that you're talking about. And we have a lot of that. Close to 80% of our daily users are first-time users. So I'd love to know how to tackle that. And we need to figure out a way to keep them in our platform. Otherwise, they'll remain not our users.
Sounds good. Should we start the breakout room session?
Okay, awesome.
All right, folks, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Hello again. Hey Goku. So we did discuss a lot of components. I think the team has some nice ideas on how to tackle the cold start problem. Well, the cold start and how can we learn more dynamically. So some of the suggestions that came up were, well, can we prime our predictions? Can we do something the first time someone goes into the website? How can we right away infer something about them? That can work. However, there is this phenomena where someone goes into a site and they develop the interest right away, right? Like even if we force them to register, even if we get their information from other websites, we are still in that place where they develop interest during the search and we want to recommend stuff quicker to them. And I'd like to get some input from my partner as well, Han.
Han, you might want to share the Excalibur. Yeah.
Right, sorry, I'll share.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Right. No, sorry, wasn't a question, just like sharing what ideas we have to tackle the problem of cold start and new users, and what came out from the breakout rooms. Like what's our suggestion to tackle the problem?
Right. That's a very good question. That's very interesting because in the YouTube channel, there are people mentioning that, okay, that we can try to just use top recommended items for different sessions or by different geographies, and we can use that to alleviate some of the cold start problem. And there are also suggestions to do item to item similarity models to help with cold start, which I think they are both pretty awesome. Do we have any volunteer from one of the groups that want to share what they have found?
If anyone is interested to share.
Maybe we can call out the room number, pick a lucky number.
Great.
Yeah, room 3, my room. There are a lot of good ideas.
Yeah. Well, I guess another way to help with cold start would be if you have like social media or like Google login, right? If you log in with Facebook, well, you know, no more cold start. You know, if anything, you maybe have a little bit too much information about your users if they log in with Facebook. But yeah, any sort of, they can log in with some sort of existing profile with a, you know, whole lot of data attached to that. That could be another very promising way to deal with cold start.
Right. So okay. So in summary, Goku, I think there are a couple of general directions we can go towards solving the cold start problem. One is, as Troy and Manoj mentioned on YouTube, that we can get session data from some social media cookies or, you know, all those external data sources. The downside is that could be expensive and might not be 100% relevant. So that's one option. And the option is, let's just use the top recommended item based on geography or perhaps any specific user sessions, user segment that you want to target to improve, etc. To just do a quick SQL query. You know, we just search and where, you know, geography equals to California and user demographic equal to 45 to 65, etc., to filter it down really quickly. And the third recommendation that we might have is we can use an item to item recommendation system that we just recommend whatever that is similar to what they have already clicked. And perhaps we can, yeah, so what do you think?
Yeah, I think all of that sounds possible. I you know, now that you mentioned these details, we do have a lot of e-commerce plugins where we have some information about even our new users, actually. And I didn't think that would be strictly relevant, but it sounds like it definitely can be. This might be a topic for another session, but we definitely want to make sure that we use that information properly. So, you know, it's not doesn't feel like a creepy recommendation after users are coming for the first time. We have details about something maybe they don't think we have. So definitely a different topic, but I love the idea of using sort of external information that isn't directly derived on our platform to be able to address the cold start.
Sure. And one other suggestion that we have off the top of our head is we can use a sequential model to recommend. So we can use a sequential model to learn what users have clicked in through different sessions. So maybe they start with a pair of shoes and they click, and the next click is a pair of pants, blah, blah, blah. Then we can try to build a model that does the sequential modeling, so we can better predict better recommend what user would use next. And one thought process would be, how about let's say, for example, the current cohort that has not churned yet, after 3 months or 6 months, or the current cohort that actually convert into a sign-in customer, and take their sessions and try to use those to model the sequential recommendation in session, so session-based. So we know the behavior of those who actually got converted or actually clicked into your customer, and we try to model their behavior from the first time they visit the site. So hopefully that will provide a positive examples of what is likely to happen for a user that actually converts.
Interesting. Okay, so at a high level, that makes sense. So you have some items, similar items, and then you'll use some information about the user's past to be able to specifically maybe shorten that list. I don't even want to know how much all of this will cost, but we'll get to that at the end. How does this work? So the first thing that you mentioned, item-to-item affinity, what exactly is that? Like, how do we have one item of interest, and then how do we generate like 10 or 20 similar items? Do you expect certain information about the items from our side, like certain extra information, or I'm just curious, like, what's involved there to be able to do that?
Right, that's a very good question. So one way that we can do this is called product vac, where we will generate embeddings for different for the session predictions. So let's treat each session. So in the language processing world, people try to model different words with different sessions, right? So there's a sentence, and you predict the next word, or you try to predict the next word, and at the end you get the embeddings of different words, and similar words will get clustered together, right? So in terms of product, we can take the session data, we'll treat the sessions, user sessions, the clicks as a sentence, and then we can try to model the product and get their embeddings, so we can figure out what they were likely to click next. So in general, that would be the direction that we would go, try to predict what they're going to click next. We will most likely need your session data, your event streams that you have saved and gathered. We have to grab those events from your end, and we'll try to build a model for that. How does that sound? You build an embedded model for that, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And we have this data. We don't actually have it explicitly labeled, but it sounds like you're saying maybe it's kind of automatically labeled in a sense. If we know what they've clicked and we know what click led to a specific purchase, does that count as the labeling needs that you need? We don't need kind of explicit labeling on top of that, or do we need to clean up here as well?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So there's two things. One is the labeling, because user actually click, so we have immediate feedback from your event stream. So it's self-labeled. We don't need to hire expensive experts to know, if it's a true or false label. And on the other hand, we would also likely to involve some sort of a feature store, a buffer in the middle, so we can aggregate some of the event streams. So some features that we might want to utilize or we might want to transform could be how many clicks, how many purchases over the past 5 or 10 clicks, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll have to use some sort of stream processing system that aligns both the online and offline data, just so we can have just so we can ensure the online and offline don't have too much skew, and also we can save some of the feature processings in the feature store. So we can, if we have some feature engineering, we can get that involved in that sense.
Okay. I think the biggest part of our budget for the engineering team is definitely on the labeling needs. So that's good news that we won't necessarily have to use all of our funding for labeling, and we can maybe use it for setting up some of these extra infrastructure you're talking about. Awesome. So any other specific questions you guys have in terms of the data sources or anything like that? Or do you think the event streams that we have right now and having them be self-labeled, this is sufficient enough to have the first version of the model you're talking about?
That's a very good question. So we would likely need to have, so the event streams is going to be, it's enough but not sufficient. So it's likely that we want to discover what you have in terms of your product database to see if we can come up with a better model or a different model on how to represent product and sessions in terms of embedding.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'd love to know, maybe again, we can have a larger discussion on how exactly we can represent, and we have several different entities here, right? We have our users, we have our items, and we have a pretty large catalog of items too. And then eventually there may be other things we want to represent, maybe even slices and maybe even geographic features and things like that. But for now, definitely users and items. I get it at a high level, but I'd love to maybe dig into the details a bit. And then how do we actually trust these embeddings that you're talking about? Because it sounds to me like they're the core driver of representing our entire platform, and then all the recommendations are based off of that. So I'd love to know how we can trust these things. How often do we actually update them? I'm just curious. It sounds like a lot of compute to update them. So hopefully it's not too often, but yeah. And kind of the cold start problem kind of creeps in here too. I'd love to know if I have an item or that's represented that through an embedding, what happens when I add a new item? Sometimes we have a lot of new items every day, right? As I mentioned, love to know how we can represent those. And yeah, I hope it's not just like a generic unknown item or something, because a lot of our new items are the main reasons that we have flash sales, things like that. A lot of users come in for these kinds of things. So hopefully we can represent them well. But yeah, I'd love to have a kind of a larger discussion around this.
Right. Okay. So that's a very good question. Now I'm going to tap into our resources and split our guests into different groups so we can discuss how do we plan, or how can we generate different type of embeddings for different purposes, and how does different methods might help or not help against might be robust or not so robust against cold start problems. So that's
perfect.
Go into a breakout session.
Awesome. Just to be clear, I'm paying you and Amar, by the way. So the larger breakout group that you guys are running are definitely on your timesheets.
Okay, so definitely we will not bill you for the breakout sessions.
That sounds good.
Awesome.
Right,
Okay, we'll come back. Do we have any volunteer rooms, or should I just pick a random number? Let's say room 4. Do you guys have any suggestions on how to generate embeddings for session or for item or user data?
Yeah, either Tony or Alexandra, you guys want to share some of the things? We were talking about even before, like embeddings and stuff, like different ways, different gold standard ways we should think about evaluation in general, and then they definitely are definitely applicable for the embedding setting as well. But yeah, either Tony or Alexandra, you guys want to share some of those approaches?
Sure. Like, oh, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
No, Tony, go ahead.
We're just like discussing like maybe for like cold start users, you can, I mean, this was like Goku's idea, but you know, you can just use like more general data about like the user, for example, like where they're from, you know, what kind of category they're in. And then as you get more data, you can use like their click streams and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think we can capture a lot of user information from their session headers, right? So like the devices, the location, the IP, all those session headers or the request headers, those are highly valuable information that we should track. Like for example, me being on my iPhone is probably going to behave somewhat differently from me being on my laptop or being on my big machine. And so that's super important. And then if we go to the discussion about embeddings, there are several ways. There are going to be several ways we can generate embeddings. It's really up to our imagination, but overall, I will just provide some quick examples, Goku, that how we can generate embeddings. So we can generate, let's say, a product embedding using a straightforward autoencoder model. So we turn the products into like a vector. Let's say the product type, the price, the manufacturer, et cetera, and you know, category, subcategory. We turn that into a vector, and then we encode them, maybe one hot or category one hot encode them, and we will train a deep learning model called autoencoder. What it does is we encode information to a latent space to a smaller, like zip it into a smaller space, and then we decode it and we measure the differences. So at the end, we will learn the interactions between different features for that product in a more detail. We'll learn the detailed interactions between different features of that product. So there will be one way to train a product embedding, and the other way could be that we can regress. You have a neural network that regress towards something, maybe regress towards the price or the GMV of the product over the past 30 days. And so with that, we will train and we'll try to train the regressor. And at the end, we take out the regressor part, the last layer that that regresses towards a single number. Then the last layer, we'll take out the last layer, and then we'll have an embedding for the product itself. And we can do similar things for perhaps user sessions. We can regress user sessions towards time. That will be towards the amount of time they spend on the site. That could be one way of trending a session or session header embedding. So there are many different ways. And also, like for images, we can take a pre-trained model that very smart people at Google, Microsoft and Google, they invented like ResNet, right? We can use ResNet to encode image data into a embedding. Just basically take out the last layer, and we have that, and we can use those embeddings to represent some of our data. And for evaluating, I mean, you mentioned it. These are critical information that we have, and in order to evaluate, we would need to, like off the top of my head, we can evaluate directly using in the purpose, like do some offline evaluation to see how well those embeddings help in our prediction for the click through. But I think I would love to reach out to our in-house expert, Jacobo, because he is really knowledgeable about evaluating embeddings.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more from Jacopo.
So I think we're room number 5. So I'm terrible with this Zoom thing. Sorry, but I think we're room number 5. But we discussed some of these ideas and add some color based on my experience in Prot2Vec. The team came up with this idea of like, we take Word2Vec, and the analogy of word in a sentence are like shopping item in a shopping session. You get a scalable and kind of, very, very robust algorithm to generate embedding for products, right? And there's extensive literature on that, an example. And it can be trained with one line of Python. If you know GenSim, you can basically train with GenSim to that. But then the question comes like, how do we evaluate that? And we came up with kind of like a ladder of, difficulty between human evaluation and an automatic one. The easiest automatic one would be take some held out session that you didn't feed the model and use K and N over the embedding space to do next event prediction. So there's a session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you never seen. You cut it at the 5th element. You take the first 4, and then you go in the embedding space and see, hey, how close is the 5th element is to the 3rd one, okay? And you can measure it with any MRR or hit rate or whatever ranking measure you want to do.
I see. Are these usually a single item, Jacopo, or is it okay to give a little bit of leeway here in terms of predicting exactly?
So so this opens up many possibilities. The easiest thing would be you take the 4th item and you predict the 5th in this example, but now you're discarding previous information. So maybe now you can take an average of the embedding between 1 and 4th and predict the 5th. You can weight the average by exponential decay. So the most recent item weights more, for example. Or you can even feed like a vanilla LSTM into this. The LSTM needs to be super simple. We're not trying to make a good model. We're trying to just gauge the semantics of the embeddings we learn. So there's a different way of doing that. I don't want to really promote my papers, but we extensively wrote about this. So if you check online, there's like an entire list of them. So this is number 1. We try to be quantitative about it. Number 2, on the other side of the spectrum, it was brought up, well, we just ask product people. Very good. We take up some product people. We don't want to bother them with a million similarity judgment, but we may ask them to provide like for 100 items, what they think would be a relevant suggestion. And then we kind of, test the model based on these gold standards of people. So these on the other spectrum. It's mostly qualitative. It may suffer from human bias, but we know by definition that at least encodes some semantics because humans did it, okay? And then there's one in between these two, which is, let's say this marketplace must have some taxonomy, even just organizing the product, okay? So a quick thing you can do, you can take taxonomy and label the products, and now you train a model. If I give you the embedding of the product, can you tell me which category that is? So we basically turn the evaluation into a classification problem in the space. And the general gist is good embeddings should reflect the categorization of the website, okay? So it's kind of in between because you're using some human input information, but at scale, we don't really need to collect that. And it's a bit of a quantitative measure because at the end of the day, we can treat it as a classification problem. So a mixture of these 3 things will typically give you a good sense of your embedding, and they will also provide you with way of tuning hyperparameters, something we didn't discuss because it's more advanced, but if you plug in GenSim to do Prot2Vec, you're gonna get not good results. So there's some tuning you need to do on the hyperparameters. But since it's an unsupervised problem, the question becomes, what is the parameter that is the best one? And these methods that we touch upon may be all 3 used in different ways to kind of solve this problem, okay? I hope that was a good, hopefully a decent survey of like options that I've seen working well in the real world.
No, that was excellent. I think this deep dive definitely clarified a lot of things for me. So just to reiterate, so I can share this with my team, there are many different ways to embed the different entities in our system. We can use certain tasks and pull out the last layer or some intermediate layer to use that as the embedding. We can also have use aspects about the items themselves that aren't necessarily specific to the image, like maybe reviews or more geographic information about or what subsets this item belongs to, buckets, etc. And then to actually evaluate these things, there's a whole spread from fully automated to human in the loop and something in between. I think we'll start with, since we aren't using our budget on labeling, maybe we'll definitely establish some of the more human in the loop options here. So definitely have these evaluations, and yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. So with this, so we have these ways of representing these items, and we have ways of evaluating them. We're able to generate candidates, if you will, for a specific item. Is it good enough to stop here? Can we just sort of take the top things here and just show them on the page, or what are the schools of thoughts there? Or is there something else we should do on top of this?
I just go first. My impression is that if you have a decent Prop2Vec strategy, and you can throw that as your first session attempt. Again, you can decide that you want to do some weighted average of the session vectors or something like that. But it's a K-NAN over that. If your e-commerce isn't super huge, it would be super fast to serve, relatively straightforward to code, and it will give you like a feeling of how people will interact with this type of recommender. The only thing you need to be aware of is being a marketplace is now you may solve the cold start user problem with this, but now there's a cold start item, of course, problem. As if an item has never been done before, it never comes up in recommendation. So that's the downside of this, let's say, simple solution at day one, is that it won't address that type, but at least it will give you something to start with.
Excellent. Okay. Awesome. Han, Amar, do you guys want to drive me through some of the next stages here that I really haven't talked much about, something more than evaluation in the offline setting that definitely the execs will care about is in the online setting. So I think we have a little bit more time left. Maybe we can quickly touch on that, and we'll probably cover some of the more infrastructure pieces, because I do have a lot of latency throughput numbers to share as well. And I think the infrastructure will largely be dictated by some of those requirements and constraints. So maybe we can discuss that in the after party. But yeah, any sort of concluding topics you guys want to touch on in the last 10 minutes that we have?
Right. So as Jacobo mentioned, we are our approach in a session-based system or any RecSys, right? Like we have something like a retriever, the candidate generator, and we have the ranker. Especially in this system, we need to be careful about where these would fall. Like if you look at the UI, every time someone takes an action, it goes to a session. Some considerations we want to keep in mind. Do we want to retrieve every single time? Do we have a small enough candidate space that we can just re-rank every time instead of retrieving new items? For example, with the Netflix case, you have certain movies and you rank them every time someone logs into the session. I believe, as Jacob mentioned, for this case, we might be able to get away with, we have the embeddings, we use approximate nearest neighbors or even K-NAN with small items. We already can give you the top list and we sort with that. Do you think that would work, or do we need something further?
So I definitely get the appeal of that. And I definitely like being able to serve very quickly. My only concern is, like I mentioned, we do have a very large catalog and a catalog in flux. Is it possible to, similar to how we're representing new users, is it possible to represent new items in a way that's not particular to the item as well? Because, the one thing, even though we do have a lot of new items, when a customer, third party, or users add items to the marketplace, they do have to provide some details about it that are from a finite space. So they usually have to tell us what kind of categories belong to, and even subcategories as well. So is there any way to leverage that to maybe it may not be a super specific way to represent the item, but a decent way that it could populate the result somehow? Because that unfortunately, that is important to us, to be able to capture the new items.
That's definitely a good question. My take on this would be, yes, we can leverage for sure what the user has specified. For example, the description, we can use that embedding to compare with other items and retrieve, try to give the new items a chance, at least without the more comprehensive stuff. but I'd like to also categories. Like if you know the item category, you could approximate it to be near the other items in its category. But I'd like to hear more from Han or others on the call.
Yeah, so if we use an autoencoder type of model because the inbound space for like how a item is recorded inside your database is going to be finite. So so that is bounded. So we can definitely just use it. We can definitely use an autoencoder model to represent the item as a learned embedding using neural networks. Yeah, and to evaluate how good things are, there are different approaches that say, for example, on a offline setting, before we train the model and try to evaluate, there are different type of scores that say, for example, when we retrieve, we might want to use, let's say, recall at 30 if you have 30 views, 30 widgets on your product page. If it's 30, if it's 5, we can use recall at 5 to determine how many good things that we actually get when we try to retrieve, and then after retrieval, we usually will do a re-ranking or a ranking model to determine how well the ranking is. And in determining how well the ranking is, there are many different metrics. Like we can use precision, because now we know how, because for ranking you can use precision at K, or we can use something that's very rank aware, that's say NDCG, a discounted cumulative gain, to do that, to evaluate the offline how things work. So when we rank them, we should definitely also pay attention to the bias, the ranking. So whatever that show up on the top of the list has the highest propensity for user to click, versus whatever that showed up at the bottom, just because that's, usually users have pays a lot more attention on the top left than bottom right. So that's the similar ways to how we read things.
I see. Okay. Speaking of ranking, I probably shouldn't have saved this topic to the end, but a lot of the things that we want to show, there's a lot of business logic that we want to reflect. There's a lot of filtering and ordering. How do we sort of incorporate this? Is this something that the onus falls on you guys? Is that something you incorporate into the models itself? Or is that not how things work? Is this something I do after, the team does after using the results from these machine learning systems? How should I think about the business logic that we want to incorporate into all of this?
That's a good question. How are you?
And also for evaluation as well, right? Because I think it impacts, because what we show may be different from what the model produced. And then do we evaluate both of them separately, together? Yeah, just a little bit more insight on this would be great.
Sure. So in terms of different filtering or different business requirements, how are you currently doing that? How are you currently implementing different requirements, like for filtering or to boost some products in your?
Yeah, right now, again, we've been doing this because we've been having some issues. When we show our popular items, we just use counts. So unfortunately, the front of the page has been a lot of sort of secondary, auxiliary, accessory items, if you will, because these are the items that most people just add on or buy last minute. And unfortunately, they're not the core items that our platform really has. So we started creating these filters where we would start labeling items by, this is an accessory, this is a sort of a main good, perishable goods, etc. So we do have these filters now for each item that are built over time and also updated. But yeah, we're not really we're not using them properly. But yeah, if there's a way to incorporate that into this, that would be a great addition for sure.
Okay, that's awesome. So I would imagine you are storing all these filters or this filters in some sort of a database table,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So what I would suggest, what we would suggest is that we could use that existing table. Let's say, for example, you want to demote some accessories or like chewing gums or whatever, right? That you see at the end of that the items that you see at grocery checkout, right? Like those accessory items or auxiliary items, if you can have a label on those to say that's -1, you don't want to promote them as much. And then perhaps in some other features or some products that you want to promote, you will have a +1 or 2 label in the table that you want to control. Then we can have a filtering or a re-ranking stage where we will just retrieve the factors or the coefficients from the table that you have complete control over with, and we'll just adjust the ranking scores using that table. So if you want to remove it completely, then you have a label for that. If you want to boost, you boost once, twice, etc., and then we'll just read that table and we will apply the coefficient that way. So this way, you don't have to call us, or you don't have to ping the IT to deploy a new model, train a new model, and at the same time, you have complete control over what you want to promote, what you want to demote, what you want to remove from the item catalog in terms of when we rank or boost.
Okay. Yeah, I like this clean separation, because we've worked with systems before where it's very deeply tied to the tech. And yeah, absolutely, our product team creates a lot of tickets to do. Anytime they want to experiment with something new, it takes change across the stack. We definitely like to avoid that, but this sounds like a very clean way to keep experimenting with our business logic and be able to incorporate it with whatever version of the models or systems that we're running right now. So yeah, that's definitely great news. Okay, so we unfortunately just have 2 minutes left, so we're probably going to skip the last breakout room. But in the after party, I'd love to, we'll open up the room to everyone. But I think some topics we can discuss are kind of monitoring this, because I don't want to be, pinged when things are crashing. So how do I kind of how do we maintain these systems? And then definitely around infrastructural needs, like how do we think about that based, using the constraints and requirements that we have. But yeah, we can do all of that in the after party. But yeah, thank you both, and thank you everyone for kind of contributing to this. I have a much better picture on what needs to be built. But this is definitely something that's going to take a few more iterations in terms of discussions to flesh out the details before we start with any code, for sure.
Yes, it is highly sensitive to the business outcomes. So no decision is going to be made over a 90-minute session. So it will be a continual discussion, and we will try to come up with some sort of a design diagram or some infrastructure diagram or some workflow process chart, so we can have a better discussion in the next round. So I am going to stop recording now, and we can head on towards the after party.
I think definitely 2 hours would be needed for this at least.